Welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. I have a special guest for you today, Ali Damron, who lives over in Colorado, and she's a women's health and hormone expert who has studied Chinese medicine and the ancient systems that help bring us better insights into our health, into our hormonal health, and how we can stay more balanced and supported overall. So welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So today I cannot wait to dive into this topic with you because I feel like this is like the topic of the century.
Yes.
Maybe it's because I'm a woman and maybe it's because I'm in my 40s, but it seems to be a really big topic of perimenopause, menopause, women's hormonal health. Why has it not been addressed properly until now? And even now, why are we scrambling to figure out solutions and protocols and approaches? Why is this becoming such a loud conversation right now where women are really suffering and saying, hey, I want to stay vibrant and youthful and healthy. And instead, I'm battling with my body. And
Yes,
so,
I love
yes.
that.
Yeah. So, will you start by introducing yourself and what got you into this work in the first place?
Absolutely. So thanks so much for having me. I love having these conversations. My name's Ali Damron, like you said, and I am a women's hormone expert. I studied acupuncture and Chinese medicine and do a lot of like more functional medicine stuff now too. But I love women's health so much because I feel like there's just such a gap in it. And I will say, to your point, it is becoming a really loud, prevalent topic right now, but it was definitely not when I started practicing. And I love the fact that it is. It's fantastic. I think it's a movement that's been a long time coming. But I think that I love it because women, I was talking to a patient like earlier today, women's health is people just don't know, right? Like I have a lot of teenage girls that I work with and they're freaking out because they have their period and they're embarrassed and what's happening and they're symptomatic and they don't know. And their doctor's just like, well, you take some birth control, like, or deal with it. I don't know. We go into fertility, we go into postpartum, we go into then perimenopause and all of it really, every single stage that I go through, I'm like, there's like just this lack of even compassion, honestly, empathy, understanding. And there's actually a book that it's a new book. I'm reading it right now. It's called The New Menopause by Dr. Marie Haber. And she's a wonderful doctor. But in the first part of this book, she talks about how why, like to your point, like why this hasn't been discussed. And, menopause was called hysteria in the olden days. And they used to call patients and she's like, I'm like so embarrassed and mortified to admit this, but they would call women like WW, which was whiny women, which was just like, I'm tired, I'm gaining weight, my mood's all over the place, I can't sleep, I'm hot. Like they were just like, you deal with it. Like it's menopause, right?
Yeah.
And so luckily, we're in an era right now where these conversations are happening. We're learning why they happen and we're learning how to help women. Like 51% of the world's population is going to go through menopause if they live long enough. And that's a lot of people. A lot of people that are going to go through this stage. And we are learning now amazing things with it about like how to prevent chronic disease, such as Alzheimer's and diabetes and certain cancers and metabolic disease with all of this stuff that's opening. So it's actually just like a really, really exciting, amazing time for women's health. And I was talking to this patient earlier today and she was like, gosh, it's just been like such a long, hard road. And I was like, I know. And unfortunately, you're sort of a pioneer in paving this path, but we're starting to have the conversations. Like it's going to get better.
And I love that you shared the whole spectrum. I think that when it comes to, girls go through puberty and get their period and there's stigmas and stuff around that. Then I see the whole category PCOS, endometriosis. We're dealing with inflammation and problems in the early 20s through the 30s. Then we talk about fertility, pregnancy, postpartum. Then you talk about the thyroid conditions that come and the hormonal imbalances just from having kids in modern day times and in the West. Then you hit your new wall. I feel like my friends and I are like, we're in our 40s and our kids are finally old enough to be easy. And boom, you just get whacked with a new problem. And it's perimenopause. And you're like, excuse me, body. I thought we were hitting the home stretch here. I thought everything was going to be easy. And now, like you said, we sound like whiny women. But in fact, it's just our body doing the opposite of what we expect when we're keeping all consistent factors the same. Like I hit 40s and I was like, are you freaking kidding me? My workout has to change, my stress management, my approach to my health, brain health has to change. Like, what? And then menopause, I'm scared. I'm like, what's that gonna be like? What is the level of health I have to build to be okay during that phase? And so will you kind of share why is it that we hit perimenopause and it's so hard?
Yeah, so perimenopause, by definition, is actually just somewhere between 2 to 12 years before menopause. So menopause is actually one day. Menopause is 1 year without a period, and then after that day, you are postmenopausal. And so somewhere in this 2 to 12 years, your hormones start shifting. And this can be a subtle thing at first, right? I think a lot of people just ignore, like we've kind of been taught to just ignore and deal and handle things. And so I think a lot of people miss like several years of it actually, where like maybe their periods are like, oh, I'm getting a little bit more PMS-y, like a little bit irregular. Some women don't track their periods, so that might be like subtly that they don't know. And then they get into like this later perimenopause where they're like hot, can't sleep, they're not having a period, but every 60, 90, 120 days or longer type of a thing. And then they start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like really in menopause right now.
Right.
And so I think that with that, there's so many things to do for perimenopause. And I think, the conversation of HRT is a big one upcoming now, which is
Yeah.
great. And like I said,
Thank
the
God.
research is super, super compelling for it. Actually,
Yeah.
I ask every day if I believe in it, if I like it. It's not really like a belief thing. I just let research guide me. But with that said, I always tell my patients, it's not an either thing. Like to your point, you practice Ayurvedic medicine. It's not that you can just not do anything and take HRT.
Right.
There's these lifestyle things, like you said, stress management and sleep. I know you and I have chatted a lot about sleep before. There's nutrition, there's movement and exercise. There's just things that we have to do as we age to take care of ourselves. And I think if we continue to do those things throughout our late 30s, our 40s, and our 50s, like that really does set such a beautiful, huge stage
Sure.
for the decades after that too.
True. When it comes to these things, though, I kind of feel like all of functional medicine is saying you must focus on sleep, nutrition, movement, stress management, and what was your fifth one?
So either like HRT supplements,
Yes.
specialized testing, I think those are big pillars
Right.
too.
And I feel like I do it. I do it because I have to. I do it because I love it. I do it because I love how I feel when I'm taking great care of myself. But I feel like we're talking to an audience who's tired. And the audience is like, what the heck do you want me to do here? I'm doing my best. And so what is your guidance for that woman? Because I see that woman all day. They're all my friends. And they're like, Shivani,
No,
we're
totally.
not going to obsess with health like you are. Okay. So just what's the one or two things? Because we're not changing the Coke we like to drink. We're not changing the Chick-fil-A we like to stop for. And like there's a lot of habits that they're not willing to change.
Absolutely. So one of my very biggest principles in my practice is not making wellness a full-time job. I
Yeah.
think I do the things that you do too. And I want to just emphasize this, that I didn't start doing those things just like one day. Like this has been a accumulation of over a decade in my life of like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit better when I eat a little bit more protein. But like I certainly didn't start eating 140 grams of protein a day. Like 100 was killing it for me at a point. I started probably eating 60. I didn't even eat any vegetables till I was in college. And at that point, like it was slim pickings for a long time. And now it feels a little bit better. And so it's just sort of like, first, I just want to remind people that when you see influencers online or podcasters that seemingly have it all together and you're like, gosh, like that just feels like so far away from me. They didn't start there either. And also you're only seeing half a second of their day, right? And so
Totally.
there's that part of things too. But I want to encourage people to just start slow. And I think looking at, depending on where you are, so if we're talking about perimenopause, looking at the biggest dial movers. So this is going to be a little different for every person. And it kind of depends on like where you're at. So if you're somebody who is tired and you're eating a standard American diet, a lot of ultra processed foods, a lot of fat, a lot of high sugar, low protein, low nutrient dense foods, you don't need to like clean out your whole fridge and like flip your life on a dime. Just start with like eating more protein or trying to add some produce in there, some fiber. Start
Sure.
with hydrating. Just like start with a big dial mover that feels doable for you. And you can obviously work with someone like you or I to kind of help guide that, because I think that's also really overwhelming to know what that is.
Yeah.
But that's generally how I start. The other thing that I think we miss in the whole conversation of perimenopause is that this is the era also of responsibility. And
Yeah.
so, to your point, we are 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and we have parents aging, we have kids that we're either raising or empty nesters, we have careers and businesses, we have relationships and marriages and partnerships, we have all kinds of things. And I do think it's midlife, right? Like we kind of make fun of the midlife crisis, but there's a lot of questioning going on. Like, am I
Yeah.
doing this right? Am I parenting correctly? Is this what I want my life to look like? Is this what I thought it would look like? Overwhelm, urgency, sort of living up to societal standards and keeping up with the Joneses. Like there's a lot of stuff happening also where our hormones are going on this huge roller coaster. And so I do think that like from that perspective, like I always ask my patients, how's life? Like, what's going on? How's your work? How's your home life? Are you stressed? Are you overwhelmed? Are you freaking out when you get notifications and urgency? And that's a huge, I work a lot on the nervous system. It's like one of my pride and joys in my
Nice.
practice of helping women like calm down a bit, because I'm a little bit more of a type A person myself, and it's been a huge journey in my own life. But
Yeah.
I do think that, you mentioned that a lot of functional medicine people are talking about stress management. And I always feel like it's kind of just like this asterisk of like, do all these things and then also manage your stress. Like, what does that
Right.
act, right?
Yeah, and if you're just listening to the podcast and you're not seeing the video, my whole reaction right now, I'm having like an entire physical, visceral reaction to everything she just said because it's so true. Like you usually, not everyone, but in your 40s, you're just sandwiched. They call it the sandwich generation because in front of you, your parents are aging. And I am trying to manage aging people around me where I'm like, you have to take care of your heart health and you have to take care of your diabetes. And no one wants to listen because I'm the child. And I'm like, this is my topic. I could actually teach you how to do this, but no one listens. Then you have
Nope.
children who are entering teenagehood. Also don't listen.
They
So
also
suddenly
don't.
you're just battling on all sides with crazy humans and you're told to manage your stress. And I feel like saying, F you. You want me
Right.
to meditate and breathe out of this? No.
Totally.
And so it's
Totally.
actually so good that I teach Ayurvedic self-care because I say it all day and thus I do it. So I walk in nature. I do a lot of the little things. Um, but yeah, it does take such a toll and yet it seems to be the hardest one to address for most people.
Oh, totally. I think so too. And I think partially, honestly, it's because we don't know how to do it. Like, does
Hmm.
it look like sitting in meditation? Because if you're also really hyped up all the time and your hair's on fire, you're running and going, sitting in meditation is going to feel really hard. And I also think even on that topic, we have a very misconstrued definition of what that even should look like. Like I get patients all the time that are like, I tried to meditate, but I can't stop thinking. Like, no, you're never going to stop thinking. We can only go 3 seconds without a thought, and that's on a good day. And
Yeah.
so like, the definition of meditation is like to catch those thoughts wandering off and gently, non-judgmentally bring them back. And
Mm,
so, we just are terrible at emotions in our culture, really terrible at teaching emotional health, well-being, mental health. Like we just don't even know what that is or why it's happening. And so that's something that I'm just super passionate about in my own practice of teaching women how to manage stress. And I do that through a lot of, honestly, I think repressed emotions are a big piece of that.
sure.
So when you're dealing with your aging parents and they won't listen to you and you're frustrated, but yet this is my mom, I shouldn't really be pissed at her.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Same thing with your kids. You want to wring their necks sometimes because they're driving you crazy, but you love them so much too. And so there's
Yeah.
all kinds of just friction and tension and emotional stuff that we shouldn't feel that way. This is wrong. This is bad. You should be grateful. And so we just repress, repress, repress.
I work out for this reason. If I exercise, I can move a lot of energy and emotions. Then I walk in nature. Walking moves energy. I constantly feel like if I move my energy, I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
because sometimes we need that. And then sleep, I invest in sleep like it's my whole job. And then if I
Yeah,
invest in sleep, I'm able to process and clear so much. But I agree with you. If we're not going to address that root cause traumas or mental health issues, and that's going to be running its own computer processing in the back, that's going to be keeping us potentially in our sympathetic and not just ever able to sit down and relax.
totally. And that's where it kind of ties into hormones. So through
Yes.
this nervous system, which is your mind body connection, we, get frustrated that we're bloated, or that our periods don't feel good, or they're really heavy, or we can't make enough progesterone, or we feel anxious, or, we have chronic pain, like all of these physical symptoms, but it's rooted from the nervous system constantly in that fight or flight. And so that, everyone's like, why are you talking to me about stress? Like, I just want my period better. I just want my bloating gone.
Right.
But when we are constantly in that fight or flight, your brain is trying to save your life, right? And
Right.
I think we forget that. But when it's doing that, it compensates in a lot of ways physically. Like I always say for perimenopause, when your stress hormones go up, sex hormones go down. So
Hmm.
we don't that progesterone, which is helpful for sleep and mood and PMS and period regularity and perimenopause support. Like we don't make that anymore, or it's very low because our body is up on stress hormones. Digestion, same sort of thing. Everyone's looking at gut health and functional medicine testing, which I do in my own practice, but we are either in rest and digest or fight or flight. And if we are in fight or flight most of the day, which most of us are, we are not resting and digesting. And so you're going to have your acid reflux, your indigestion, your bloating, your constipation, your just sour stomach, just not feel good because your body doesn't have the resources to make the digestive enzymes, the bile, the acids to break that food down in your gut.
Let's take
And so
that analogy. Actually, you finish and then I'll ask my question.
there's a lot of just like physical symptoms that are due to like this fight or flight response that we've sort of just again have an asterisk of like, oh, probably caused by stress. Like, do something about that.
Right. And I like the way you just said we don't have the resources. I do think of certain supplements that way, like CoQ10 and vitamin D and certain building block vitamins and supplements. I'm like, that's a building block. It's not an option for you to take it or not take it. And so
Yep.
I do think of it as like, what if you were building a new office today? Would you give them computers, paper, pen, printer? Like these are basic resources for an office to run. Let's say it's your child who needs to do homework. Like they need some stuff to do it.
Right.
What if we're never giving our body the resources it needs to do its job, but we somehow expect it to give us everything?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
wonder we have like this traffic jam of pain and, suffering going on.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think our body compensates, just minerals, right? So magnesium, for example, does 50 different reactions in our body. It's needed for a whole bunch of metabolic things. And there's something called the magnesium burn rate. So when you're stressed, magnesium, B vitamins, those things get burnt through. And so things like liver detoxification and sleep and mood and all of that stuff is just thrown off. And so one thing that I want to preface this, I guess, was saying too, or add the caveat is that I think a lot of women spend their life fighting their body, right? Like
Mm,
body image, weight, hormones. I don't feel good. Why am I tired? Why can't I sleep? Like just so frustrated with their body. And I get it. It is frustrating to feel those things, but remember that your body's always trying to compensate. Like your body's on your team.
yeah.
And it's just compensating for the lifestyle, the things that it's trying to do. And so, when people feel anxious or constantly in that fight or flight, I'm like, so let's say thank you. Like your
Yeah.
brain's trying to help you and save your own life right now. And it's up to us to give it the message that like, hey, we're really safe. We're our world is safe. We're okay. You can calm down. But if we continue to just feed it, it's going to think the world is really unsafe for your life. And it's going to continue to help compensate for that.
That's actually a really profound thought and reminder because I do think as women, we are constantly at battle with our bodies. Based
Mhm.
on current day society, we're never thin enough, never beautiful enough, never young enough, never fit enough. Today I was in the gym and I was like, I'm an athlete and all athletes could build six packs. so technically I could build a six pack. And then I was like, stop it. Just stop it. You can do it all and you can have it all, but not today. Okay. We're not going to try to grow our company and raise beautiful kids and walk into summer break and do any of these ideas. Just stop. And so I wonder if that self-torture, and I think about it this way from the Ayurvedic perspective, like the goal is body, mind, and spirit in alignment. And if we're trying to bring body, mind, and spirit in alignment, we can't also degrade and yell at and be mad at the same body. We can't be like, you suck. You're always inflamed. You're always off. You're always tired. Get over it. And like crack a whip on the body and say, body, catch up. I'm expecting all this. And yet again, not give it any of the resources, like you said.
Totally. I always call it like, could we give ourselves messages of safety versus danger? So there's a big part of our brain called the subconscious, obviously, that's sort of like a toddler, just sort of underdeveloped, and it needs to be spoken to like that. And so if you had a kid that was like, gosh, I'm so tired and I don't feel good, or, my thighs are fat or whatever, like you would never say to your child, like, why are you tired and you need to get thinner? You would never say that. And so when we degrade ourselves and say all these things, we're giving ourselves these messages of danger, right? That this is not good enough. This is not acceptable enough. We don't feel good enough, those types of things. And could we just flip that coin and be like, okay, so like fatigue, a lot of my patients are always tired, to your point. And I'm like, okay, so could we stop saying like, why am I so tired? And I don't have time to be tired and I want to feel good. Could we instead say, why is my body asking for more rest? Like, let's ask the question of like what it's trying to do. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I don't sleep. I don't go to bed on time. I'm burnt out. I'm, burning the candle at both ends. Like, no wonder my body's screaming at me to rest because it's tired.
Yeah. And if you're into the topic of health, which if you follow me online, you might be into the topic of health a little bit since that's all I teach. All the people I follow, the content that I see online literally is telling you how bad everything is on earth. So, and it's funny because my mom just got into Instagram and she just visited and she was like, Shivani, you have to watch you have to wash the vegetables properly. There's a lot of chemicals. Are you using baking soda? Shivani, apples, you have to watch out for the chemical on them. And I thought, oh my God, my mother is seeing the content I'm seeing because I know all about a peel and washing my produce properly. Every skin cream is bad. Water is bad. The air is bad. Like literally everything I do is for the most part safeguarded. Like I'm using metal, I'm using glass, I'm adding minerals to the water. I'm doing all these things. But when I travel, I'm going to a lot of conferences in this phase of my business and life. I was just in Arizona and I didn't drink the water and I dehydrated to the point that my skin started peeling in multiple places because I was so worried about the water quality. And I was like, guess what? Living all anxious and stressed doesn't help your health either.
That's like such a profound thing. That was such a huge part of my own journey so I grew up in Western Nebraska, which like health, wellness specifically was in no part of my childhood at all. And like I said, I didn't eat a vegetable until I was in college. And so then I went to Arizona State University and then I kind of got introduced to some certain things and wellness and all of that. And then I wanted to become an acupuncturist. And in acupuncture school, like it's not that they're trying, like I said, this is very well intentioned with people saying these things. So it's not like they're trying to like be fear mongers or anything. They're trying to help. But when you get bombarded with like, wrappers are bad, receipts are bad, your skincare is bad, the air is bad, the water's bad, your food's bad, you have to do this to your food, vegetables are bad, you have to watch like the EWG, Dirty Dozen and Clean 15, like, I was pregnant actually at the end of acupuncture school. So that opened a whole other thing, like what I was exposing my unborn child to. And then I had to breastfeed perfectly and formula was terrible. And I got to a place in my life with massive anxiety. And it has been, so my oldest is 11. So this is probably, 11, 12, and 13 years ago now at this point. And I actually had to go to therapy for it.
Sure.
That I needed to figure out how to live in the world because I also wouldn't eat gluten and dairy. And I thought soy was terrible. Like, and the thing is, when I like looked at things, it raised up my stress response. I could feel the adrenaline, like at family dinners and holidays, like, this is all really bad. And they're wrapping it in aluminum foil and plastic wrap. And like, what are we doing? And I just,
My family microwaves food. I'm like, I can't eat that. You killed it. They're like,
yeah,
oh, Shivani.
or microwave plastic. Like, eventually, you can do the best you can. I have stainless steel water bottle right here. I do the best that I can for my family, but it is everywhere. And you can't live, again, you're sending so many messages of danger to your brain that like literally your world is scary and threatening and dangerous. And you don't want to do that. So that was creating, I was on this quest to be super healthy. I was one of the most unhealthiest I've ever been in my whole life
Wow.
because I was
Wow.
so anxious.
Yeah. And to your point, I went to functional medicine right when 2020 happened. I was like, well, the girl
Yeah.
who has no immune system better go check what's going on and make sure everything's okay. So I finally went to functional medicine. I went to two practitioners over 2 years, dug into all the problems in year one, fixed those, and then second set of digging. And my doctor sat me down. She goes, I just want you to know you solved your leaky gut. Good job. Like you did it.
Yeah.
Guess what you did now? You caused gut dysbiosis, new pathogens due to stress. And I was like, excuse me? She goes, yeah, you have caused new dysbiosis. You had a clean bill of health, and now we're checking you again, and you don't. I need you to reduce stress. And I looked at her and I was like, respectfully, I'm finally winning in business, and it's been a decade. I'm not slowing down anything. And she laughed and she goes, okay, Shivani. And I had to like go sit with it for a few weeks. And then I laughed at myself and I was like, really? Really? You teach Ayurveda and you're going to continually cause gut dysbiosis due to stress, knowingly you're not going to change anything. And so when I later saw her for my podcast, I was like, I had to laugh at myself. She goes, it's okay. I laughed too. I knew you're a practitioner. I knew you'd have to like logically work it out in your mind that statement's insane. Like you can't, that makes no sense if you know the impact of stress and dysbiosis. And so I just wonder as women if we're just running around like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to be amazing, trying to be perfect, scared of all the toxins in the world, driving ourselves crazy, thus inflaming ourselves. And that's why each season is hard. No matter what season you're in, it's hard. And
Yeah.
could we instead, like I think of it as 90-10. So I'm always like, I'm 90% great. So 10% is fine, which itself is also stressful, even trying to achieve 90% in this day and age.
Oh,
So I
that's a
wonder
lot.
if we can 75-25 it. We can be like, look, the majority of what I accomplish in my home is good. When I travel, whatever anyone's going to do to the food or whatever, trust that I have the resiliency to
Totally.
handle it all. And thus it's fine. And I'm actually here to enjoy my best life and not stress out all the time on cleanliness and all the things.
I truly do believe that. I think that the nervous system is just such a huge indicator of how we feel on a daily basis, but like health too. Like we know that the nervous system and built up trauma can trigger autoimmune diseases and heart disease and cancers and even like metabolic things like insulin resistance. Like when you're constantly in fight or flight, your body's leaching out that glucose, which can look like hypoglycemia. And so I really do think that so much that is the root of so many good things of like regulating that, and changing our perception of things. And I do think, to even like the toxin conversation, I tell my patients like, let's do the best we can with our skincare and hair care and all the things and stainless steel and all of that stuff. But let's just work on our detox pathways.
Yeah.
Yes, we're being exposed to a lot of things, but could we just, give your body what it needs on a daily basis? And, there's a million ways to do that through red light and sauna and hydration and clean food and getting nutrient dense foods and supplements and whatever else. But I really do think that. I think that just all the stress and perfection of trying to live like these healthy lifestyles is so stressful.
Yeah, it can be. I wonder sometimes if I'm just driving everybody crazy. Like, am I in service or am I driving you nuts? Because I could easily be
Well,
doing both, you know?
well, I think so. As a practitioner, I think like attract people who are going to be attracted to you. Like I know in my own life, there are friends of mine who don't do anything that I do.
Me too.
like nothing at all. And like, I don't offer unsolicited advice. Like they do their thing, I do mine, whatever. That's totally fine. In a more professional hat, like I share my opinion. And like I said, I try. So a couple of years ago, maybe like when I was first in practice, I remember doing like a talk, like a health talk for a group of people who were probably like blue collar, just very introductory into wellness people, like had a fairly small food budget. And this was before inflation and all that stuff.
Mm.
And me and this chiropractor stood up there and like, honestly, I think back and I feel very horrible about it, like scared the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Like meat's terrible and vegetables are terrible and your sugar's terrible and your ultra processed food and everything you're getting at the grocery store. Like you only shop the organic periphery. And I really do like think back to that pivotal moment because I looked at their faces and they were so defeated. Like that did nothing in service for them
Right.
at all.
Right.
They left completely overwhelmed and scared. And I
Yeah.
think, that was a really, I'm sorry for them that I did that.
Yeah.
Just trying to help, obviously, at that point, but that really left a marking pivotal moment on my career that I never do that. I just like refuse to be part of that culture of fear and perfection. Like very few people can do that. And I think you have to meet people where they're at.
It's true. No, I really do appreciate that. I actually did a talk like that at the Fountain Blue Hotel a few years ago. And it was like to the entire group of working team. So there was the exec team, which I had done a talk for them before on Zoom. And then this was like everyone was in the cafeteria for their lunch break who worked in the hotel. So the whole team, it was the entire mix of service staff who service all of us who stay there or anyone who stays there. Um, and I thought to myself, how do I share this in a way that helps? Because what if you're working all day, you get home, got to feed the kids, got to
No.
handle everything else in life, and then sleep? And the topic was sleep. So I said, listen, here's the thing. Just like you put a baby to sleep and it takes like the 8-step dancing and process, just think of yourself as you matter that much. Doesn't matter what you do, but
Oh,
put together like a little ritual, tiny ritual. Might be like the music and the hot shower and the heating pad and bed. But
yeah.
whatever that cadence is, start practicing it every day to train your brain that you matter the most and your sleep matters the most. And I
Love that.
remember feeling so good about that talk because normally my thought process is like, everything's bad. And
No.
I really try to be careful with that now. And I just keep those thoughts in my brain because it doesn't
Yeah.
serve anyone, you know?
Yeah, I left that night feeling really crappy about my career, to be honest, and like the
No.
message that I sent. And to be honest, like, we just shared like kind of each topic, but I'm not perfect either. I'm a
Oh,
human being. I'm a mother. We're doing sports at night. We're running around. Like I do the best I can too, but
oh,
there are people that are better than I am too.
of course. Of course. And that's always going to be true. And seeking that perfection is pretty impossible. And we go through busy seasons in our lives. My children and I live off of Chipotle drive-through, and that's
Yeah.
like our thing. I'm like, well, Anya, order your Chipotle on the app, and we will pick it up between A and B, and you guys are going to eat it. We're
Yep.
vegetarian. I'm gluten-free, but to be honest, I can't even eat that food anymore. It doesn't sit well. So the kids will eat that between place to place. So I really do think it's like you said, like where can you meet yourself and not stress yourself out about it? But when it comes to perimenopause, what is some of your other key guidance to your patients?
So one of the things that I believe in so much for perimenopause is strength training. So
Mm,
at the end of perimenopause, so remember I said it's 2 to 12 years, so that's a huge range. And there's
yeah.
kind of phases of perimenopause too. So in the initial phase of perimenopause, maybe one that a lot of people kind of glaze over and just like, gosh, why are my periods getting heavier and I'm getting more PMSy? That's when estrogen, which is one of the hormones in our menstrual cycle, actually is elevated. It actually goes up. So it's kind of like we call it our second puberty. Remember, teenage girls have lots of breast tenderness, their periods are heavy, they're kind of irregular. That's what's sort of happening in that beginning stage of perimenopause. And then toward the end of it, when we get closer to menopause and postmenopause, estrogen levels actually do come down.
Okay.
Estrogen is a hormone that hormones are like Goldilocks, right? We need them in the right amounts, not too high, too low. It's going to cause symptoms. So too low of estrogen is going to cause like vaginal dryness. I call it like hot, dry symptoms. So hot flashes, night sweats, skin dry, hair, nails, all that stuff. Just you feel dry. Your joints feel dry. That's why like joint pain and frozen shoulder can be
Yeah.
prevalent. Those types of things. But estrogen also creates a lot of like insulin sensitivity. So we want to be really sensitive to insulin and not resistant to it. That's our blood sugar hormone. It protects our heart, it protects our brain, it protects our bones against things like osteoporosis and osteopenia. And so it does all of these amazing things. And that's where sort of like the trend and this conversation of HRT is happening to ward off some of those diseases when we're not making estrogen anymore. But strength training in the building of muscle can be that stimulus on your system that reacts like estrogen. So the more muscle we have, muscles are really metabolic tissue. So it can create that insulin sensitivity. It creates better metabolic health. In metabolic health, we think about weight gain, but metabolic health is insulin, cancer is metabolic in nature, heart disease is metabolic, brain health, like Alzheimer's, is metabolic in nature. And so I'm talking about far more things than just like gaining that stubborn weight when we hit 40.
Right.
But that too, I mean, it'll help with that too. It also is a great stimulus for our bone. And so we can help prevent things like osteoporosis and osteopenia with resistance training. We can eat more food. We're more sensitive to carbohydrates, like, or more resistant, sorry, to carbohydrates. So all good things. So I think that that's something that in generations in the past, women have gotten more frail as they've aged. They haven't, strength training has not been a thing that women have historically done. Maybe some cardio or walking or jazzercise, all good things. But if we don't have that muscle, that tends to lead us down this road of some of these chronic diseases as well.
Strength training is a big one, and it's interesting because I think the current generation in their 40s gets it, but still there's a lot of people I know who don't strength train. They're like, I walk, I Peloton, I just move. And I'm like, guys, you need to go lift. And they're like, I don't want to be bulky. I'm like, I don't really care. It's not about bulky, it's about muscle. And we need it. We need our bone health. We need the metabolism. We need that churn and burn, especially as we're aging in our bodies. And so,
Mhm.
what else do you recommend for perimenopause?
So I have kind of like 5 pillars to hormone health. So number one is that nervous system, like stress management that we kind of talked about.
Yeah.
Two would be nutrition. So in essence, protein, fat, fiber at your plate is a good way to balance blood sugar, get nutrient dense foods in. And then from there, we can break it down into like that's the macronutrients into the micronutrients of like, so if you have low estrogen, flaxseed's really great for adding that. If you have low thyroid function, Brazil nuts are really great to add. There's certain, depending on what you're doing, there's certain foods that can be really helpful there for hormone health. I talk a lot about sleep and sleep hygiene. We want to
Yeah.
get that reparative sleep. I talk about exercise and movement, so strength training and moving throughout the day, right? We don't want to just sit around all day. We want to stand and walk and pace and
Yeah.
stretch and do those different types of things. And then I think my last pillar is supplements, vitamins, and herbs to help support an aging body and correct imbalances. And that's going to look a little different for everybody, right?
Sure.
Depending on your lifestyle and your diet and your genetic predisposition and at what age you went through menopause. Those are very individualized things.
Absolutely. And each of those pillars matter. When it comes to perimenopause and menopause, how do you handle women? I know that there's high estrogen, low estrogen, there's high progesterone, low progesterone, high testosterone, low testosterone. I know people do pellets and things like that. I went to the doctor and I knew I had low progesterone, and my Dutch test showed 2 years ago now, probably, postmenopausal progesterone. And I was like, guys, I've known this whole time I was high estrogen. Like, we were supposed to figure this out in 2020, not take so long. And when I went to the doctor, they were like, we require annual mammogram, ultrasound, bone density test. And I was like, annual mammogram? Why? They're like, that's standard of care. And I thought, oh, I only go to functional medicines. I have not had to hear these words called standard of care, mandatory requirements in a long, long, long time. And so, what is your guidance for women who are trying to manage their hormonal health, but may not want to always do these steps that they don't want to do?
So I think objective and subjective data is important. So I think for one, in a cycling woman, we can look at your menstrual cycle every month. That's a really, really great data point. It's kind of like your fifth vital sign of when did it come? How regular is it? Was it clotty? Was it heavy? Was it light? What color blood was it? What symptoms did you have? That gives us a lot of information into your hormones.
Sure.
Truly. So a lot of my patients will be like, okay, well, to work with you, do I need hormone testing? And I'm like, some do and some don't. Honestly, if you're pretty textbook, like high estrogen, low progesterone is a fairly textbook thing.
Sure.
Low estrogen is too. It's fairly obvious what's happening. And so sometimes we can just get started and just start treating what we see.
Mm.
Sometimes I do, if I'm a little confused on symptoms, it could be a few different things like low iron, low thyroid. I will have them do some testing, some blood. If things are not responding in the way that I expect, definitely do some testing. I think people on HRT definitely have to test, like have to test before, have to test during. We really want to see what your levels are. And I actually really like Dutch tests specifically for HRT because it shows the detoxification of it too, which is a really important thing. So I think that's great. Like I mentioned, I kind of threw gut tests under the bus here, but I do use them occasionally in my practice. So yeah, I think all of those things, like I said, it's just a really individualized thing to figure that out. Even for myself, like I don't have like a specific yearly hormone test that I do. I just kind of look to see like how I'm feeling and when the last time I did it was, and then like thyroid and iron and vitamin D, like those are all great things to do yearly, I think.
Sure.
But hormones, like I just kind of look at the patient, look at myself, see what's going on.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I think we assume we're fine. And only when the voice gets really loud about, oh, you have these symptoms, you have these problems. Like just today, I was speaking about brain health. I have a Facebook group, and I was like, you know what? Let's talk about brain health. Are
Okay.
you able to focus? Are you able to recall names? Are you able to remember the things you expect to remember? And if not, are you blaming aging? Don't blame aging.
Yeah.
Address brain health. Brain health is gut health. Brain health is hormonal health. It's all these things.
Yeah.
Why should we lose our functionality, vibrancy, and energy over time? Like it's a slippery slope down. I don't agree with that. And so I love that you shared these five pillars because what you're saying is look, we know the body's going to shift. We know the body's going to change. We know these hormonal shifts are coming. But we also have enough science now to understand the building blocks we need to put in place across the board. We do have to personalize the testing. There's no one template. We can't just say to women, hey, strength train and eat more protein. By the way, I'm doing that. That doesn't solve everything. It's super helpful. You can address major building blocks, supplement differently for this time frame. Like each thing matters. Nutrition at a new focus level with more fat, more fiber really helps. But then it comes down to the nuances and the details and the testing, like you said. And so do you have any final thoughts or things that you want to share on this topic and how women can start to look at it or approach it?
So I think, like I said, be really self-aware. So like you said, so I think that we can go a little longer with testing sometimes, but that doesn't mean that we're ignoring the issue, right? So like in myself or patients that email me and they're like, I had this like really weird cycle this month. Like I definitely look at it and I'm like, okay, so this was your normal last month and like the few months before, and we had something like spotting that was kind of weird for you. And so, specifically like for a menstrual cycle, like I usually look at patterns. So 2 to 3 in a row. And I'm like, okay, this is a pattern. Like, let's see, because the endocrine system is super sensitive to a whole bunch of things. And so I certainly, if I'm feeling like I am not sleeping great for more than one night, like more than 1 week, like I'm just not sleeping great, or constipation or brain fog, or my energy feels bad, or weight training, like I was lifting certain weights with ease and now it feels a little heavier than it should. I certainly look at all of these benchmarks in myself regularly, and I ask my patients to do the same. And so it's never like we're sweeping anything under the rug. It's just that we sometimes can figure it out without testing. But I always encourage women to look at how they're feeling. Like I understand, actually, I have to say, I understand the barriers to entry here. People are busy, finances are hard, it's expensive, but it's just annoying to finally come to grips with like, I gotta address this. I gotta find the person, I gotta meet with them, I gotta tell them everything, I gotta order the supplements, I gotta change my life, like on the midst of aging parents and kids, right? Like I get it. I understand why people sweep it under the rug for sure and just pray that it's gonna get better. But the longer that you let it go, the harder it is to treat also.
True. True. And it's something to think about. Like, do you always feel this way? So I have had a time period now where I always have headaches. And so finally, someone said something about perimenopause, and I realized, you know what? I am not, and whenever I want to create a shift in my diet, I hire a health coach because I know that a diet shift is actually such a huge shift to make for yourself. You're going to resist it. Let me not say that for everyone. I know I am going to resist it wholeheartedly because I have so many opinions about food and nutrition and how it should be done. So if you want to change, you're probably going to have to, like, I have a health coach right now. She's having to literally go at it with me and my brain because my brain won't accept it. Even if I can execute it, my brain's like, can't be that process, can't be that way. How can you eat that much? How much protein can you have? How are you digesting it? Like all my thoughts come through. But as she's giving me the protocols and the guidance and I'm testing it, I'm like, oh, I just her message to me was, you can't follow a diet like anybody else. You teach on camera 5 hours to 7 hours straight every day. Do you understand? You're using your brain like an Olympic athlete. So you need more fat and you need more hydration. Treat the brain like it's its own muscle group. And that shift has been a huge shift for me because I can tell by 3, 4 o'clock every day I've got a headache because I used up every resource into my brain as opposed to supporting it. And so, where can we support our hormone health and our gut health and each system through this phase that we just talked about today or through this transition?
Yeah, I actually love that you, about the brain health that like you noticed you're having this headache and then hydration and more fat like that was actually a really amazing thing. Um, so for gut health, I would say a few things. Number one, eat some fermented foods.
Yep.
Like that goes a long way. How you eat also goes a long way. So chew your food slowly. I know it's hard. Don't multitask. Like actually, because our digestive process begins in our mouth, right? So if we're just like gulping down hunks of food, like not paying attention, none of those enzymes are getting into that, or very few are getting into that food, which sets the stage for the whole thing and can lead to a lot of bloating and indigestion and all the stuff. So I think that, and then I think, everyone's like, I need to take a probiotic, but probiotics have their place, totally fine. But if you can eat fermented foods and prebiotics, so fiber, basically your fruits and vegetables, beans, legumes, lentils, those types of things, that into food integrates into your body so much better than a supplement ever will. That goes for vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics, all the things. So if you can get it through your food sources, fantastic. If you have a huge struggle with that, sure, we can add some supplements in. But yeah, I think that that's a big one for gut health that people, I mean, we don't really eat fermented foods here. So that can be a big one for people.
True. It's just not in our habits. It's not part of the typical diet at all.
Not really.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Well, I have loved this conversation. And I also loved that we talked about mental health and like the idea of why are we battling with our bodies? Could we instead bring body and self on board and instead give all, not all, but mostly is a good place to start, mostly positive messages to ourselves instead of constantly saying, hey, you're too tired, we're running behind, this is not nice. And so do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yeah. So I think along those lines, I think, we're always going to have the negative thoughts, right? Our brain's going to go down the rabbit holes of like, this isn't good enough, or these catastrophic or all or nothing thoughts. What I tell my patients, something that I work on in my own life on a daily basis is what ones are we going to believe and what thoughts are we going to buy into? Because that will set the tone for your nervous system. If we, again, give it those messages of like, oh yeah, I'm not good enough and I am inadequate and I do, do these terrible jobs at things and I am fat and I am ugly. Like you're buying into that. You're believing your thoughts. So we get tens of thousands of thoughts a day. We get to decide which ones we believe and buy into.
Wow. It's a profound reminder. It's actually a really profound reminder. In Vedic philosophy and spirituality, we teach, or I have learned, it's not like I'm the teacher, I have learned that your mind just generates all these thoughts. It's like the monkey mind. And if you look at the monkey mind from an intellect standpoint, from just above it, and you observe the mind, you can say, okay, mind, I see you. I hear you. I see all the thoughts. I am not the thoughts. Those
Right.
thoughts are external. They're influenced. They're all sorts of things. And so, really, the job and what I teach from Ayurveda is tune into your intuition, your inner guiding voice. It is going to tell you the truth, not all this chatter that you hear. I love that reminder. Thank you.
Listening to more in your heart. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I find as women, we're just beating ourselves up a little too much about things that honestly are sometimes outside of our control. I think about that sometimes. Like you're watching social media. Social media says that you should be on a yacht off the coast of Greece. And that's living the best life. Well, guess what? It's not the life I signed up for. I signed up for my two beautiful kids being educated in South Florida and this responsibility. So, how can we always wish for something else or think that that's better when what we have is great? Like, how do you just bring mindfulness and gratitude and presence back into the here and now and be more at peace instead of constantly striving for things that are fictitiously created by other?
I think it's hard. Like I think, I think back to even like my own childhood and how generations were before social media. And I think comparisons like as old as time. You know what I mean? Like the grass is greener type of a mindset. But the thing is, before social media, like we had to actively like go get that information.
True.
You know what I mean? Like
Go into town.
right. And we had to go out and talk to people or drive by places or see things. Like it's just, I mean, I've done several social media or podcast interviews on this on my own podcast too. But social media is one of the biggest reasons for nervous system dysregulation. And I run a business off of there. Like it does great things. So I'm not going to say that it's all bad, but I think that, we need to set boundaries around it and understand collectively that like I mentioned, we're seeing such a small amount of people's lives and we don't know what's going on. I think we know that logically, but it's really hard to see just like post after post after post of like beautiful women and beautiful bodies and strength training differently. And then, on a yacht and then their clothes and then the kids look perfectly and your kids are screaming in your face. And then like, it's just a really hard thing to continuously get that.
I see lots of workouts and lots of food, and I'm always like, my food doesn't look like that, and I
I
don't look
know.
like that in the gym. Both are not true.
No, my house doesn't look like the ones that look like they're being showed every day. Like,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't. It
Like,
does create a lot of inferiority, I think.
yeah, it creates so much stress because what it's doing is it's piling on the to-do list. Like I see the homes and I'm like, wow, my house is not furnished or decorated anywhere in that hemisphere. Oh, that level of strength in the gym. I don't know when I can do that weight. Oh, that food that's beautiful and looks incredible. I am not that chef at all. So it's just,
Or like the women just in their clothes and like their beautiful makeup. And I'm like, I don't even begin to know how to do that. Like,
yeah, I know. And so it's just, I think of it as friction. What are the things in your life causing friction? And how can you reduce the friction? Because, like we've talked about today in this episode, there's always going to be some friction. There's
yeah.
going to be environmental factors that are against us and all these things. But each friction point we can either address or we can look at it and say, I'll deal with you later. It's okay. And if social media is creating so much friction, just creating really good boundaries with it. I've reduced my use of social media a lot because every time I'm on social media for more than 15 minutes, I'm like, really? You're going to spend your whole life consuming? Either you post to inspire and share, or put that down and go live your actual life because you have a real life and your real life's amazing. So why are you sitting there consuming garbage made by people who just want attention? Like, what a waste of your life. And so that's the conversation I have with myself. And that will usually cause me to put the phone down.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had to have lots of renditions of boundaries around social media. And it is, again, we talked about awareness, but awareness around your habits around social media, because the research is just undeniable that it is creating mental health issues collectively.
Totally.
So I think, just awareness of how it's making you feel.
Yeah, and really bring in that patience and self-love and the things that you need most. Because like we talked about, perimenopause, menopause, these are just big transition points in our lives. Body is changing, hormone cascades are changing. So as we're experiencing these shifts, how can we lean in and say, look, yeah, this is a shift. So I'm going to figure out what's my new calibrated self as I move through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today.
It's been lovely.
This was so nice. I loved having this conversation. To me, the conversation of perimenopause is so important. It's like really highlighting. I meet so many women who are like, I don't know what you mean by perimenopause. I'm like, it's a transition. Everything you're complaining about is that. And that's okay. Like, let's figure out each piece of it. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
And will you share where people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram, speaking of social media, at Ali Damron. I have a podcast called The Ali Damron Show. I have a YouTube channel at Ali Damron and a website. So pretty much anywhere, just my name, Ali Damron.
And it's ALIDAMRON.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.